"I suppose it was the child. It must have been the child." Mr Pennycuick was deeply concerned. "I wonder why he never said anything," he addressed Deb, when Rose and Frances had been sent to bed. Deb? "Seems strange, don't it? We had so much talk together. Quite like a sort of son, he was. I could have made a son of that fellow. Poor lad, poor lad! Suppose he thought it wasn't the straight thing to bind a girl of ours till he was in a better position. It'd be just like him. Well, but Mary, of all people!" This was the puzzle to all. It must have been the baby. She certainly did dote on that child, and love him. Love my dog, eh? But to think of her keeping it so close all that time! Afraid I'd make a fuss, I suppose. You could have told her, Deb, that I don't stand in my children's way for the sake of my own feelings, and a Carey of Wellwood isn't for us to sniff at either, if he is poor. A Carey has been good enough for a Pennycuick before today. God, I wish I'd known. I might have got him something better to do, and saved them both from this. Poor old girl! Is she very bad, Debbie? Shall I go and talk to her a bit?" "I wouldn't tonight, father, if I were you," replied Deb, with a weary air. "She is quieter now, and I have given her something to send her to sleep. I will keep my door open, and go and look at her through the night. I think she will be better tomorrow." On the morrow Mary was at least more self-controlled. She came amongst her family with the look of one who had passed through an illness, and shrinking from the first words and glances. But they all gathered her to their hearts, and murmured loving sympathy in her ears, and tenderly fussed over her and waited upon her. Her father took her to his sanctum, and showed her his old daguerreotype and valentine, and told her they should be hers at his death. Miss Keene, excited as an old maid is over anybody's love affair, wanted to take over the housekeeping as well as the doing of the flowers, in order to leave the mourner free to enjoy the full luxury of her state. The governess, assumed to be above love affairs, was very strict with Frances, holding her to tasks set on purpose to prevent her from teasing her eldest sister. But Frances had informed the servants overnight that Mr Carey was drowned, and that he had been Miss Pennycuick's affianced husband all the time, unbeknown to anybody. And the tale was already spreading far and wide, to the Urquharts at Five Creeks, to Mr Thornycroft at Bundaboo, to Mr Goldsworthy and his parishioners, to the editor of the local paper, so that soon the family friends were arriving, to press Mary's hand and condole with her, to show her how she had risen in the world, as a woman in the eyes of all. "No, no," she protested, when the affianced husband was too literally taken for granted. "It was not a formal engagement. It was only," defending herself against the puzzled stare and lifted eyebrow, "only that we understood each other. He was coming back, if he had lived." The wish was father to the thought. Good, honest girl as she was, she had persuaded herself to this, that he would have come back if he had lived, and that then the omitted formalities called for by that graveside kiss would certainly have been observed. It seems incredible, but rampant sex does strange things every day of the week. There is, at any rate, nothing extraordinary in the way she clung to the sweet dignity that a similar belief on the part of others brought to her, the poor, plain girl, who had always been out of it. The long hidden photograph was now put into a costly frame, and set up in her room for anybody to see. Frances would often sneak in with a visitor, to show the manner of man who would have married Molly. There were even times when Mary herself was the exhibitor. At other times she might have been found kneeling before it as at a shrine, and weeping her eyes out. And she put off her colours and ornaments, and wore black, and nobody made any objection. The hero of romance was given to her unquestioningly, and with him a respect and consideration such as she had never known before. Lovers talked to her of their love affairs, feeling that she was now one of them. Her father maundered to her for hours at a stretch of the old Mary Carey, at last secure of sympathy and a perfect listener. Deb was reserved and silent, but otherwise as devoted as the rest. And then came the inevitable discovery that Guthrie Carey was not dead, after all. It was made at Five Creeks, while Frances was on a holiday visit to her friend Belle Urquhart. At Redford nobody thought of reading the shipping columns in the newspaper; their interest was supposed to be gone for ever. But Jim Urquhart glanced at them daily, looking for the arrival of a friend from overseas, and one day he saw a ship's name that was familiar to him, and bracketed with it the name of G. Carey as its commander. The coincidence was startling. He pointed it out to a man staying in the house, a stranger to the Redford family and to the district. "There was a mate named Carey on this ship a while ago. He changed into that unfortunate Dovedale that was wrecked, and was lost with her. Odd that the captain of his old vessel should have the same name, same initial too. Our friend was Guthrie." "Guthrie Carey? Oh, I know Guthrie Carey. Met him in London last year, just after the Dovedale wreck. He told me of his narrow escape. Was really going with her on her last voyage, and only prevented at the last moment by the offer of this captaincy from his former owners." "It's the same man. Do you know him?" They all told how much they knew him, and there was great commotion at Five Creeks. Jim was for driving hot foot to Redford to warn Mr Pennycuick against disseminating the newspaper through the house too rashly. Alice and her mother each volunteered to go with him, so as to break it with feminine skilfulness to Mary, whose reason might be destroyed by too sudden a gorge of joy, like the stomach of a starved man by clumsy feeding. But while they anxiously discussed what ought to be done, Frances was doing. The enterprising young lady slipped away, and with Belle's help caught and saddled her pony, and was off to Redford as if wolves were at her heels. No war correspondent on active service ever did a smarter trick to get ahead of other papers. She burst into the family circle violently. "Mary, Mary, Deb, Rose, father! Mr Carey is alive. He wasn't drowned. He wasn't on the Dovedale. He was just going. But they wanted him back, and they made him a captain, and he's here now. His ship came in last night, and there it is in the paper, and his name, and Mr Mills at Five Creeks saw him himself after the Dovedale was wrecked, and he knows him well, and he's in Melbourne now, and I expect he'll be here directly. Perhaps he's coming up now, this very minute." She was checked by angry exclamations from all persons addressed, except Mary. She, at the moment bending over a table, cutting out needlework, straightened herself, and stood stock still and staring, while first her bricky face went dark purple all over, and then seemed drained in 3 seconds of every drop of blood. She heard the words "Mr Carey is alive", and instantly believed them. At the same moment her dream palace vanished, and she saw the bare ground of her love affair exactly as it was, as Guthrie himself would see it, and just how she had deceived herself and others. Her healthy heart and nervous system could not support her under the impact of such a shock.